Number 5 on this list is the 27 Club. Now this is a pretty specific club, and from my research only really applies to you if you're a musician. This will also only apply to you if you're 26 and will be turning 27 in 2022. But if those things describe you right now, then you'd better watch out. This curse originated from the death of Robert Johnson. If you're unfamiliar with who that is, then Google tells us that Robert Leroy Johnson was an American blues musician and songwriter. His landmark recordings in 1936 and 1937 display a combination of singing, guitar skills, and songwriting talent that has influenced later generations of musicians. He's now recognized as a master of the blues, particularly the Delta blues style. And the term master may even be a bit of an understatement when it comes to how talented this guy was. Eric Clapton is quoted saying that he was the most important blues musician who ever lived. In fact, he was so good that some people have speculated that his talent couldn't have just been human. Theories have been thrown out there that Robert Johnson made a deal with the devil to become the greatest blues musician who ever lived. Part of the reason that this theory is tossed around is because Johnson left this world far too soon at the age of 27. People have speculated that at that age of 27 his deal was up and he now had to pay the devil his end of the bargain. This curse gained a lot of traction over the years because so many other godlike musicians also died at the age of 27. Brian Jones, founder of the Rolling Stones, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Kurt Cobain, and Amy Winehouse all died at age 27 and were all generational talents. Now this could all be one extremely tragic coincidence where we as humans are trying to provide some sort of narrative and make sense of why our favorite artists were taken too soon. Or potentially there is some evil curse on these musicians where they had to pay the devil. Regardless of what it is, I really hope no other generational talent gets added to the 27 Club in 2022. Number 4 on this list is the Curse of God. The Curse of God is said to be the first curse to ever be put upon the earth and mankind. It originates with the story of Adam and Eve. For those who aren't aware, Adam and Eve were the first man and woman who ever lived and resided in a beautiful garden that God had created for them. God's biggest request was to not eat fruit from a very specific tree. As the story goes, a serpent, who many believe to be the devil in disguise, tricked the pair into tasting one of the fruits and going against God's one request. After they did this is when God laid his curse upon them and all of the men and women to follow them after that. To Eve, God said, "I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you." And then to Adam, God said, "Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return." The curse is said to still be with us to this day, and it's why it's still painful for women to give birth and for everyone to make a living. The curse is said to make it so that humans will constantly work with only the potential to succeed. Frankly, if this is a curse, then I would be more than happy leaving it in 2021 and not having this follow us anymore into 2022. I feel like working to make ends meet is simply the way of the world, but if it didn't have to be, then I'm all for it. Number 3 on this list is a bad luck curse. Throughout human history, there have been many variations of a bad luck curse. These can affect all of us from time to time. Sometimes everything is going wrong and there's just nothing you can do about it. Now the argument has been made that a curse of bad luck is just in your mind, and that when you start saying that you're cursed with bad luck, things will just get worse. But here's a few stories of people who claim that they've been cursed with bad luck, and let me ask you if it's coincidence or not. Number 1, an anonymous person on Quora writes, "In the beginning I thought it was a coincidence, then the pattern continued until now. Every school that I attended eventually closed, not 1 or 2, but 4, including the university that I attended, and that's not all. I worked for 4 companies and they all shut down or went bankrupt shortly after I joined. The last company I worked for managed to recover a month after I resigned. And I forgot to mention that previously I had lectured at a prominent university giving a special program which was also discontinued a year after I joined. Weird or what?" Another story was heard on a show called The Morning Edition. I quote, "Good morning, I'm Rachel Martin. When your relationship is on the rocks, sometimes you gotta think outside the box, like a man in California did when he found a psychic online who billed herself as a love specialist. She claimed that she was cursed with bad luck by his ex. Luckily, the psychic said she could remove the curse for the small fee of $5,000. He did pay her, but he says his relationship did not get better. Now he's suing the psychic. What if she saw that in the cards too?" End quote. Now in that second one, my guy is literally paying to get his curse removed and gets slammed. Like that could be the worst luck in the entire world. Again, this could all be a coincidence, but I think we all know the feeling of being down on our luck, and whether it's a curse or not, I'm praying to leave that behind in 2021. Number 2 on this list is the August curse. The August curse is worldwide, however it's mainly connected to Russia. There's a strong feeling in Russia that in the month of August, bad things will happen all over the country. The people believe that their country is cursed during that month and they need to be extra careful to stay safe during that time. These bad events can take many different forms. They could be individual to one person or on a much larger scale. This includes wildfires, plane crashes, natural disasters, economical hardships. If it's bad, then you can probably name it, and it will have happened in Russia in the month of August. The belief really took hold in 1991 when during that month of August, Russia saw a massive amount of these tragedies occur all across the country. It was so overwhelming that the people believe wholeheartedly that something paranormal had to be at play. Some have chalked this up to potentially having something to do with the alignment of the planets, whereas others have told stories of an evil warlock who cursed the entire nation many years ago, specifically during that month. Whatever the true cause is, if you're Russian, then I would recommend praying that this August curse doesn't continue into 2022. Number 1 on this list is the curse of SINATRA. The curse of SINATRA is a really interesting one that seems to be only pertinent to the people living in the Philippines. If you happen to be living in the Philippines and are also a fan of karaoke, then there's one song that you may want to leave off your list. That song is My Way by Frank Sinatra. An absolute classic and a song that still stands the test of time today, but not one that you'd want to be singing along with in the Philippines. That's because in the last 10 years there have been at least 6 deaths that have happened right as someone is singing that song in a karaoke bar. And the craziest part about all of this is that they've all been murders. Rumors have circulated that there was some curse associated with this song, and when someone in the Philippines sings it to karaoke, it triggers an aggression in someone else. Like all of the entries on this list, this could be a coincidence. However, how many times has somebody sang that song to karaoke over the last 10 years in the Philippines? I feel like it can't be that many times. So to have 6 murders come right as that's happening, it's honestly really shocking. I'm personally praying that the people living there can get this curse removed because My Way is a banger and everyone deserves the right to sing along to it.
Coming in at number 5, we've got the Annabelle doll. We'll kick today's list off with a top 5 favorite. I can't begin to count the amount of times Annabelle has been brought up in our lists. From lists detailing horror movies, creepy dolls, the exploits of the Warrens, and more, this Raggedy Ann from hell is feared around the world. Apparently for good reason too. You don't make a hyper-successful horror movie franchise based on real events without some real events, right? So what's so scary about the Annabelle doll anyways? The real life one looks pretty much nothing like the porcelain nightmare depicted on the big screen. Why would people be so afraid of a fabric doll with a big smiling face? Well, you'd have to go back to the origins of the rumors of cursedness. Back in the 1970s, a couple of young nursing students started noticing some strange happenings around their house. After receiving a doll as a gift from one of their mothers, it seemed like a dark energy permeated their home. Annabelle came from an antique shop, and before that, nobody seems to have any history on the thing. But once it dropped into the lives of Donna and her roommate, things got really weird. At first, it was just little stuff. The doll would move around when nobody was looking, often changing its pose when people were home or totally changing locations if no one was around. Creepy, but not terrible. Unfortunately, that was just the beginning. Annabelle then started leaving creepy notes around for Donna to discover, often with messages like, "Help," scrawled into scraps of paper. They called in a medium who did seem to think that there was evil within the doll. Before they could do much else about it, Annabelle even wounded a guest who stayed on the couch one night. This led to an exorcism of the doll, which didn't seem to work. Of course, the girls wanted to get rid of it as soon as possible, so the Warrens decided to take the doll with them. For years, Annabelle was kept in a glass enclosure complete with warning label. The curse might still be there, but in a room full of restrained curios, there isn't as much Annabelle can get up to these days. I'm sure if she does eventually get moved elsewhere, more trouble will begin. Coming in at number 4, a phone number. It's hard to imagine something like a curse being associated with a simple string of digits, right? A phone number is just a sequence of numbers leading to a destination after all. But apparently a very specific 8-filled number has caused misfortune for all those who claim it. If you end up on a new phone plan in the near future and notice too many octuples, ask for a different one. It could very well save your life. Now, that's not to say that any phone number with a bunch of 8s in it is gonna kill you. But Mobitel, a telecom company, had to nix one of their numbers after a bunch of terrible things happened to those in possession of it. 0888 888-888 was the string of digits in question, and it seemed like it caused a lot of problems. First, a former Mobitel CEO had it. He ended up dying of cancer at 48 in 2001. Rough start, but it could just be an unfortunate coincidence. But next, a Bulgarian mob boss took the number. Soon afterwards, he was killed by an assassin. So maybe there is something to this after all. Finally, a businessman became the keeper of this number. All seemed well for a little bit, but this dude actually ended up getting shot outside of a restaurant. So unfortunate ends for all of them. After that last death, Mobitel took the number out of circulation altogether. They never gave a straight answer as to why either. Maybe they just wanted to avoid getting caught up in rumors about curses, it's bad for business. Or maybe the curse was getting too real and they didn't want more blood on their hands. Coming in at number 3, we've got King Tut's curse. Now for some truly legendary curses, we have to go way back in time. Maybe folks back then knew something we don't, because it seems like these curses are much more powerful and long-lasting than the ones we're more familiar with today. Or maybe superstitions just held more sway before widespread communications technology was available. I guess we'll never know for sure. But yeah, ancient Egyptian curses have been a very popular topic for quite a while, likely especially influenced by the archaeologists who opened King Tut's tomb. Back in 1923, a British team of archaeologists found and popped open the tomb of King Tutankhamun. Inside waited priceless treasures, from precious metals and gemstones to a chariot to a coffin made of solid gold. However, this hidden tomb was also said to contain a terrible curse. This did not prevent the archaeologists from cataloging all the treasures though. At first, it seemed like they had all avoided the curse, but 2 months after the discovery of the tomb, the team's sponsor died from a bacterial infection. At that point, people started taking the curse a little more seriously. It would get brought up every time one of the team members died from that point on, leading many to believe that the curse was real. This kind of dark, vengeful magic was then forever associated with any sort of ancient Egyptian discovery. And of course, plenty of movies were made propagating this idea. Hell, someone even claimed that the Titanic hit the iceberg because of the mummy's curse. Coming in at number 2, the Dybbuk box. This is one that has actually received quite a bit of attention as of late. The Dybbuk box is an old wine box said to contain a hateful demon from Jewish mythology. These demons love to possess people and ruin their lives, and in fact it was the inspiration for the movie The Possession, where a Dybbuk box does just that. It gained some traction back in 2001 when a man bought the box from an estate sale and claimed that it had once belonged to a Holocaust survivor. After he purchased it, he began having terrible nightmares and witnessing strange events around his house. He sold it on eBay, which raised the box's profile and got a lot of people interested in the curse. Currently, it is on display in Zach Bagans' Haunted Museum in Las Vegas, which kind of detracts from its cursed reputation, if I'm being honest. Once an item like this becomes a sideshow, some of that allure is lost. But apparently it was the star of an episode of Ghost Adventures Live, and Post Malone decided to see what it was all about. The musician touched the box and claimed to have paid the price ever since. He says he heard the voice of a little girl upon touching it and ran away soon after. The next day, after encountering a dark, shadowy figure, Post Malone sent Baggins a picture of a giant bruise on his arm. Could the Dybbuk from the box be looking to possess a pop star? I guess we'll find out in due time. And finally, at number 1, we've got the Hope Diamond. Every person who has laid claim to this diamond over the years has fallen victim to a terrible fate. It's a priceless gemstone, rumored to have been stolen from an ancient statue deep below a mine in India. Of course there's gotta be a curse attached with that kind of story. See, the original thief that is said to have stolen it is also rumored to have died a horrible death. Then, every person who's come into contact with it has perished in gruesome, high-profile ways. From committing tragic suicides to being torn apart by angry mobs to having their head chopped off, the Hope Diamond brought despair wherever it went. There is even the case of someone being killed by wild dogs for owning the gem, which is pretty wild. Eventually, the diamond made it into the hands of Harry Winston, who decided he'd seen enough. He wasn't gonna hold on to this famous gem and wait for tragedy to befall him, so he donated the diamond to the Smithsonian, which is where it still resides today. But that wasn't quite the end of it. Unfortunately, the mailman who delivered the diamond to the museum got in a car accident, crushing his leg and injuring his head. So even when it was on its way to a charitable place of rest, the Hope Diamond caused one last bit of trouble. Maybe a great deal of the tragedies befalling those who owned the Hope Diamond came about because of their rich and famous lifestyles, but it is odd that so many strange events occurred around the gem for so many years.
Number 5 on this list is King Tut's mask. The curse of King Tut is one of the most famous curses to surround a tomb ever. King Tut was a pharaoh in ancient Egypt who boasted one of the most ornate tombs in history. This tomb carried a curse though, and those who entered it suffered fatal consequences. On the pyramids of Giza, there's a very specific curse written on the entrance. It reads, All people who enter this tomb who will make evil against this tomb and destroy it, may the crocodile be against them in the water and snakes against them on land. May the hippopotamus be against them in water, the scorpion on land. This curse stuck with those who entered. It all started with Howard Carter, the leader of the team, whose canary was eaten by a cobra the second that they first entered the tomb. Then the person who financed the whole excavation died shortly afterwards. And from there, a domino effect occurred where many others involved suffered horrible tragedies or passed away. Some speculate though that it wasn't actually the act of opening the tomb that sparked this curse, but it was what they did with King Tut's mask. King Tut had a burial mask on when he was mummified and put in his tomb. The mask is beautiful. It's meant to resemble the person it's on so that the gods can recognize him and bring him up to heaven. Inside the mask is a bunch of oils and materials that are said to help preserve the body. All of this is all well and good, but on the back of the mask is an inscription. This inscription is said to be a curse similar to the one on the pyramids of Giza. Well, if that wasn't enough, then there's a rumor this mask was broken during the excavation process and had to be reassembled when they took it back to their headquarters. Opening the tomb is already problematic, but to then break the mask of King Tut that has a curse inscribed on it, that's just asking for trouble. Number 4 on this list is King Casimir IV's coffin. King Casimir was born in 1427 into royalty. By 1440, when he would have only been 13, Casimir was named the Grand Duke of Lithuania, and only 7 years later in 1447 became the fully fledged King of Poland. He stood as the King of Poland right up until the day he died. Oftentimes, kings don't make it right up until their death, but King Casimir's success was pretty historic. He's known in Polish history as being one of the most politically active and prosperous kings to ever rule over their country. During his reign, he won several wars, recovered territories for Poland, and made their royal family one of the leaders in Europe. Due to all of the glory that he received in his life, it was only fitting that he have a tomb that reflected this. He died when he was 65 years old in 1492 and was put to rest in the chapel of Wawel Castle. There he lay for roughly 500 years until 1973. Researchers opened the tomb to find a horrible surprise. The researchers opened this tomb and investigated the mummification process and all the artifacts he was buried with. They took his body and coffin out of this place and brought it back to their lab. What they didn't realize though was that this coffin had a curse to it. It's estimated that over 15 people died who worked on researching this body and this coffin. It took a while before they realized what was causing this death, but eventually they discovered the error of their ways. You see, the coffin was cursed, but it wasn't cursed with anything ghostly, it was cursed with Aspergillus flavus. Cursed is also a misleading word to use in this instance as well, because Aspergillus flavus is actually a pathogenic fungus. A fungus that when exposed to people can become a killer. For a long time, people thought that there truly was an ancient curse surrounding this coffin, but it was actually this fungus that kept preying on people's immune systems. Eventually, King Casimir's body was taken and put back into his tomb, but not before the damage had been done and over 15 people had lost their lives. Number 3 on this list is the Screaming Skull of Burton Agnes Hall. The Screaming Skull of Burton Agnes Hall wasn't necessarily from a tomb, but it was recovered from a grave, so I think it still counts in this criteria. Burton Agnes Hall was built in the 17th century in Yorkshire. It was built by Sir Henry Griffith, who had 3 daughters he loved very much. They all moved there and were very happy for a time. One of the daughters was named Anne, and Anne loved to explore the outdoors. One day though, when she was exploring, a gang of robbers got to her and they beat her and left her for dead. When the family found her, there was barely any life left in her. They brought her back to their home, but her time on this world wasn't long. While she was dying, she had a very strange request to her 2 remaining sisters. She begged them to take her head and put it within the walls of the hall so that she could always be there with her family. She was dying, so they agreed, but neither of them actually intended on taking their sister's head off and keeping it in their home. A few days later, she died, and they buried her outside the hall without keeping their promise. This was a big mistake though. After she was buried, strange noises and banging sounds started happening all over the hall. Screams and crying could be heard throughout, and moans the family couldn't ignore. Eventually they gave in, dug Anne up, and took off her head. They brought it into the hall and the disturbances, they stopped. But years passed and the ownership of this hall changed. The new owners, they had no interest in a dead girl's skull in their home and got rid of it, but sure enough, just when they did, the noises and the hauntings started again. Over the centuries, people have tried and tried again to rid themselves of this skull many times, but eventually they always cave and they have to bring it back in. The skull truly is cursed and it must remain inside the home at all times if you ever want any peace from Anne's spirit. Number 2 on this list is King Tut's statuettes. King Tut's tomb didn't just have one cursed item, it had multiple. His burial mask is pretty widely known, but many don't know the story of 2 statuettes that also came from this tomb. These were 2 small bronze statues found inside the tomb. One of them with their hand over their heart and the other one with their hand over their mouth. Lord Carnarvon, the man who funded the initial excavation, gave these to a friend as a gift. This was meant to be in good faith and a friendly gesture, but he had no idea the trouble that they would cause. The name of the family is omitted in this story to protect their integrity, and the person who received the statues is simply referred to as James. James received these statues and brought them back to America with him, but then started to suffer the consequences. Once wildly successful, James started to lose everything: his company, his money, his family. James went through 3 failed marriages, a complete collapse of his immense fortune, and finally died of illness without ever realizing these statues were part of the problem. He left them to his grandson in his will, and the curse continued. When his grandson took hold of these statues, he was a decorated Olympian, but he also suffered a serious fall from grace. Injuries, other accidents, and failed business ventures plagued the grandson from the second that he took hold of these statues until finally he called the museum. He donated them to the museum so that they could be put with some of the other King Tut pieces and the curse could finally be lifted from his family. Now, it's certainly possible that this was all a coincidence and this family just got down on their luck at the wrong time. But anything involving King Tut has the potential to be cursed, and I wouldn't be surprised if these statues were part of that. Number 1 on this list is the Unlucky Mummy. The Unlucky Mummy is an ornate wooden coffin that was found in an ancient Egyptian tomb. This coffin's preservation was remarkable for how old experts thought that it must be. The coffin was said to hold the remains of ancient Egyptian princess Amun-Ra. The legend says that in 1890 some British men stumbled upon this casket at an Egyptian excavation site. There were 4 men and they all suffered greatly right after coming in contact with this coffin. The first man, who initially took ownership of the coffin, was seen leaving his hotel and walking straight into the desert to never be seen again, only after 1 day of possessing said casket. The second man on the very next day was accidentally shot and had to have his arm amputated. The third man, when they did eventually get back to Britain, returned to see that all of his life savings were gone. And the last man died from disease shortly after the discovery of this artifact. And just like that, the curse of the Unlucky Mummy began. Now, there are some misconceptions with this mummy. Some people believe that the Unlucky Mummy got put onto the Titanic ship and that's what caused the Titanic to sink. That was never the case though. In fact, once the coffin got to Britain, it's never left. That doesn't mean that this thing isn't still cursed though. It currently resides at the British Museum in London. Since its arrival there, other rumors about this ancient artifact have come out, such as the untimely death of writer Bertram Fletcher Robinson. He was convinced that there was no curse surrounding this coffin. In fact, he even wrote extensively on that topic, but then he died shortly afterwards. Incidents like this have happened all throughout history, further solidifying the curse around this coffin. With everything that's happened to it, the term unlucky might just be a bit of an understatement. Number 3 on this list is James Dean's Little Bastard. Now, I'm certainly stretching the definition of ancient history on this one because this story actually takes place in the 50s, but with the amount of lore that surrounds it, I wanted to include it in this video. James Dean was an extremely successful male actor in the 50s and was one of the biggest heartthrobs of the generation. He's critically acclaimed and is potentially one of the best actors to ever play the cool bad boy roles. Sadly, he was taken far too soon and died in a car accident at the age of 24. The car accident took place in a rural town in California. The accident was a head-on collision that he had in his sports car. This sports car was a silver Porsche 550 Spider, and James Dean affectionately referred to it as his little bastard. This car, although a super cool vehicle, is completely cursed. After Dean died, George Barris, a hot rod designer, purchased what was left of the car with the intention to sell it for parts. When this car was being worked on, it fell and completely crushed the leg of one of the mechanics who was working on it. This is when the potential of a curse started to materialize, but it would grow into so much more. The parts started to get sold and people started to notice a very horrible connection. Anyone who bought parts of this car started to die. The buyer of the engine of the little bastard died shortly after in a fatal car crash. Somebody who bought the tires got in a horrible accident when those same tires just blew out whilst they were on the road. The person who bought the transmission was sent to hospital with critical injuries after getting in a car crash. The truck driver who was moving the car's frame, he got in a horrible accident and he was killed. The amount of death and tragedy that ensued from this car is truly uncanny. The frame of the car that the truck driver was transporting was eventually stolen, and to this day, we don't know where it is. I hope whoever stole it though at least had the foresight not to ever drive with it, because the consequences could be dire. Number 2 on this list is the Bassano vase. The Bassano vase is a pretty vase that was made all the way back in the 1500s in Napoli, Italy. The vase isn't ornate in nature, it has a very simplistic silver design. It was initially intended as a wedding present, however, it may just have been the worst wedding present that anyone has ever gifted. That's because this vase is a vase of death. Now I know that that sounds dramatic, but it truly brings death to whomsoever comes in contact with it. Its initial run-in with death is when it was given as a wedding gift, and that same night as it was gifted, the bride was murdered in her home while she was holding that vase. Some people believe that her spirit haunts this vase now, or that a spirit of death has always had its clutches on this vase. Either way, it didn't stop with just the bride. At the time, the family didn't realize that the vase had anything to do with the misfortune that had befallen the bride, and they continued to pass the vase down generation to generation. However, it seemed that whomsoever was in possession of this vase would meet an untimely death soon after receiving it. After the family realized what was going on, they boxed the vase up and put a note in it that read, "Beware, this vase brings death." The vase was auctioned off in 1998 though, and the note wasn't included. It sold for $2,250 and it was the worst purchase the buyer ever made. 3 months after buying it, they died. Then 3 more deaths of the following owners were linked to this vase until finally the original family who auctioned it off in the first place demanded that the police take it away. Since then, no one has heard anything from it, which is probably the best thing for everyone. Number 1 on this list is the Crying Boy painting. Once again, stretching the term ancient here a little bit, but it ties into World War II, so I feel like it should be counted. Giovanni Bragolini was a Spanish artist who was famously credited with making a series of paintings of crying children. He made these in the early 1950s, and they were meant to symbolize all of the poor children who became orphans due to the brutal fighting in World War II. His initial market was tourists. However, these paintings, they started to really take off in Europe, and a lot of British families grew fond of them. For years, they were nothing more than just a painting, until in 1985, when the curse of the crying boy hit the mainstream. Ron and Mary lost their home from a kitchen fire. Even though their entire livelihood burned to the ground, the painting of the crying boy that they had, it lived on. It was the one item to survive from the fire. Ron's brother Peter was a fireman, and he said that this wasn't the first time that he saw this. In fact, he believed that he had witnessed the same phenomenon 50 times before. It was then believed that not only were these paintings immune to fire, but the owning of them would inevitably cause a fire in the first place. Mass hysteria ensued, and legends started to come out of everywhere in regards to these paintings. People claimed that it caused their family members to die, or that it was cursed with the soul of the children it depicted. Either way, this reached unparalleled levels, and finally a newspaper, The Sun, said that if people were to ship them their copies of these paintings, they would dispose of them. Over 2,500 copies were sent to this newspaper, and they burned all of them in a massive fire. I don't know if it really was the paintings causing these fires or if they were cursed, but chalking it up to a coincidence seems a little bit too good to be true to me.